Hello, you're listening to the Play Pouch. We're back once again, and this time we have better sound equipment, so that's nice.
Sure, hope so. Sure, hope so, Pete.
Yeah, it took a bit of working out, but we got there. We got there in the end. We thought, in, before we continue on with our review of games and gaming and all that kind of thing, we thought that we'd just give you both a slight background into how we started gaming in the first place, to give you a good idea of how far we've come and our experience, or XP, as the gaming terms is.
Well, we've got to level up, Pete. Everyone's leveling up now. It's such a good term, level up. Even
Got,
the government's leveling up. We're all leveling up.
we're all leveling up. We've got to get our microtransactions as well. All right, so why don't you kick things off? How did you get into gaming then?
Okay, so oh God, we're going to give away our ages, aren't we? We're going to talk about some of these old things. Okay, so my earliest memory of video games is I'm not sure on my exact age. I still think I was single figures.
Yeah.
Playing Jumping Jack Flash on the ZX Spectrum,
Damn.
black and white. And the Jumping Jack Flash, I don't know if it was based on the Whoopi Goldberg film, which is like 85 or 86,
Hmm.
or if it was based on obviously the Mick Jagger song. I've got no idea. All I know, it
Okay.
was called Jumping Jack Flash, and all I remember is it was a bunch of lines going across the screen, and there was like little gaps in the lines, and you had to jump up through the gaps, and if you got the timing wrong, you died. That was the game, and that is my first memory of any sort of gaming.
Jesus, that's cutting edge. What year was that then?
I'm definitely single figures, but I had moved to London, so I'm going to say maybe 87.
Okay. Damn, that's early.
Yeah, 87, 88, late 80s, not mid 80s, but late 80s, because I was me remembering where I used to live. So I'd moved to London when I was about 8 or 9, and it was definitely in London.
So this was obviously when graphics were at their primitive stage. I mean, this is, we're talking sort of late 80s, so they were literally just blip blops on the screen. I mean, had Space Invaders come out at that point?
The consoles were out, or at least the base Nintendo was out, but I didn't have a Nintendo to start with. I just had, like I say, a ZX Spectrum. That's what it was.
Right.
Where you used to load the, my goodness, you used to load the games through a cassette, and
Oh shit! Yeah.
it would take hours to load one game. I mean, people complain about loading screens, right? You're talking hours to load
Yeah.
basic games. I mean, other games I remember, that is my first memory, but I remember there's games like a game called Target Renegade was the game
Yeah.
I played.
Right.
And again, slightly more sophisticated because it was technically the beat 'em up, I suppose, is the best way. A side-scrolling beat 'em up
Yeah.
called Target Renegade, and Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters. For some reason, that jogs my memory as well. So we're talking about late 80s here,
Right.
not even the 90s really, maybe 1990.
Hmm.
Back when the PC was called the PC Engine, Pete. Do you remember that? When it was called the PC Engine. It wasn't called a PC, it was called the PC Engine.
Vaguely. My earliest memory of playing a computer game would have been, I think, a game called Utopia. I don't remember for what system it was for, and I think Angry Video Game Nerd covered it at some point. But it's sort of like a RTS sim, that sort of 4X style, like really early.
Really early.
Yeah, so it was probably like early 90s or something. But my first console was the Sega Game Gear. My dad bought that for me, and I was chuffed, man, because I had the Sonic the Hedgehog as my first title. So
The Game Gear was the handheld, right?
yeah, yeah, it was so good. It was so sick, like a nice little color screen, and I was glued to that thing, glued to it for months, man.
Did you not ever? I remember the Game Gear coming out, but I do remember that was after the SNES wasn't it? And it was after the Sega Mega Drive. Did you ever have either one of them?
I think I had the Mega Drive, but I think I had that after the Game Gear.
After.
So it was probably out before, but my first console was the Game Gear.
My first console, and I remember it because I remember it had an in-game built into the console called Super Hang-On, which was a
Super what?
Super Hang-On,
Okay.
Hang-On, and it was a motorbike game, and it came built in, so it was built into the console,
Right.
and it was a motorbike game, the most basic you could imagine, built into the machine, and so it was always there. And then you Wonder Boy in Monsterland. Does that ring a bell? Wonder Boy in Monsterland?
No.
Right, so I actually started slightly before you then, a couple of years before you then.
Yeah, you would have done.
So Wonder Boy in Monsterland, which was, again, they're all side-scrolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't sort of dip into the whole 3D world
Oh,
until,
no.
Doom, I think, is my earliest recollection of 3D, which was God knows when.
So yeah, the Master System was the first Sega, and then the Mega Drive was the second. I think the Mega Drive was 16-bit, which we scoff at now, but was a big deal at the time because I think the Sega Master System was an 8-bit, so it's double the power, Pete, and it was such a thing. Yeah, and it was Sega Mega Drive competed with the Super Nintendo because I never had a NES. Right. I never had the first NES. But I do remember going around a friend's house. Probably I must have been. I'm going to say I'm 11 or 12 at this point, and watching him play Duck Hunt with the laser gun.
Okay.
And it was called Duck Hunt, and obviously, you know what you did. You shot the ducks. But it was amazing at the time because I was 11, 12 years old, and it was the first kind of light gun game. Whether or not they'd appeared in the arcades at that point, I'm not sure. But it was the first home system which had a light gun. So we were just sitting there shooting ducks with a light gun, and it was like, wow.
Yeah. I remember just being blown away by, like, early graphics and things like that. I mean, the first game I think that I got sucked into was Morrowind, that came out in.
What system was that for? PC.
Yeah, it was PC, and then it was the first Xbox. So that would have been. It was 2002, and I fell for that game. That was my first RPG, and I completely fell in love with that game. I don't remember much before that, so I can only sort of really give a number of titles.
Did you not remember the debut of the PlayStation, which was like the mid-90s, and Doom and everything coming out on the PlayStation? Do you remember that stuff?
Very vaguely. I remember more like Sega Mega Drive stuff like Flashback.
Yeah, I remember Flashback, yeah.
That was a banging title. Yeah, not really. I don't really remember much of the PlayStation stuff. I was never really a PlayStation fanboy, to be quite honest. I just, Xbox was the one for me, I think.
Well, PlayStation more or less killed Sega. I mean, Sega did a lot of damage to themselves because the Dreamcast kind of was their last console and it didn't sell well enough.
Yeah.
But it was Sony entering the market. Of course, Nintendo survived. The Sega was kind of killed off by them. It replaced Sega basically, and then Sega had the Dreamcast, and then that didn't sell well enough, and then they just said, "Screw it, we're just going to become a software. We're just going to make software now."
Yeah.
So PlayStation took their place in the market.
They didn't really even do that, did they? I mean, like they sort of fell out. They dropped out for a long while, didn't they? And then
yeah, they haven't. They still publish the occasional game, but no, they're not big time anymore. Every now and again, you see a game. Last game I remember, I personally remember, is them Alien Isolation, which was a Sega, published by Sega.
Yeah.
But before that or since, I can't really tell you. But yeah, so PlayStation took their spot in the console market. Yeah. And it was just a two-horse race, obviously, until Microsoft entered in the early 2000s. So that's when you got your stuff. That's when you, I suppose. So basically, the Microsoft era is kind of what kind of really got you into it. Then
Yeah,
got you
yeah.
really into the gaming.
I think it was really Morrowind that got me sucked in, and then it was Final Fantasy VII. You know, I remember going round to our fellow friend's house, Alan, who does our 80s podcasts, by the way. If you haven't listened to them, head over to my other channel, and you can watch them, listen to them, and watch them there, because
Yeah.
I've done a whole lot of visual things to it as well, dithering from the point. But yeah, we used to go round to Alan's place, and you'd be there drinking your cherry coke
Cherry
and
Coke.
yeah, playing Final Fantasy VII, and you'd pull off all these feats, because I remember struggling with the game, and you had the Knights of the Nine summons. I
No,
remember,
yes,
and you used to
yeah.
spam the shit out of that on all the enemies and stuff. So that was good fun.
I was probably on my 6th or 7th playthrough by that point, Pete. To be fair, so I knew the game.
Yeah,
I played the game so
yeah. I
much
mean,
by
like,
then.
Final Fantasy VII is a completely different series of podcasts, which we're planning to do in the future. So we'll move on from that. But yeah, so for me, it was really Morrowind was my first love. Did you have a first love? I mean, I'm thinking you're going to say Final Fantasy VII, right?
Yeah, as you say, it is its own podcast, so I'll keep it brief. But it's just that Final Fantasy VII changed the way I viewed games. So before that, the games were just about, there wasn't really stories in games, or if there was, it was so minimal. It was about, can you beat your high score, or can you beat your high score, can you kill the last boss, kind of thing. But there was
Yeah,
very little story, very little engagement. And Final Fantasy VII, because the story was very well written, even though I know people can look at it now and say, you got invested by such bad graphics. Well, at the time, yeah, the graphics were amazing at the time. It's all retrospective. The graphics were out of this world at the time, and the writing was very good at the time. Again, you got to compare it to what was around. There really wasn't. There was the
well, yeah,
occasion.
you didn't. We didn't know any different, and
Well, no.
it would have been just mind blowing to us.
Yeah. So that was it wasn't my first game, but that was my first love. It was the only game that I ever really replayed, and I replayed it a lot of times. So yeah, and that was
And
my first. That was
Aerith holds a special place
yeah.
in your heart.
She does, yeah, because it was the introduction to, like, I suppose, the first kind of love interest in any in a game.
Yeah,
They even went as far as to give you a love triangle. Like I say, we won't talk too much about it. They gave you a love triangle with teeth and everything, and all these things. It's just like you don't associate. You didn't associate anything like that in video games.
mm.
It was the first RPG I played, and it made me see everything's an RPG nowadays. But that was an RPG when there was very few RPGs, if
Yeah.
any. That was the first of its kind, at least over here anyway. In Japan, there was a couple of earlier Final Fantasies.
And
But no,
it was Aerith, not Aerith. Okay, everyone.
it was Aeris.
It
It
was
was Aeris.
Aerith. Yes.
It was Aeris.
But yeah, I mean, like, now everyone is sort of gone with the Jap way of, which
No,
is
no.
fine. But I don't think it sounds as nice. Aerith. I think that's like Aerith is a lot nicer.
Yeah, Aeris, Tifa, Barrett is, that's what they were called to me.
Mm,
Even if it was only in the UK, I mean, that's where we are, so that's what the name is. They can call them what they want. It's fine.
yeah.
I'm not bothered. Yeah, so that was my first love and introduction to the RPG genre, which is still my favorite genre, even though I do feel it's been bastardized a
Yeah.
little bit, because it's like, well, now everything's an RPG. If there's an XP system, it's an RPG. No, it's not really. It's got a couple of RPG elements, but the XP and the level stuff that appears in nearly every game nowadays, its roots is in the RPG, but that doesn't make those games an RPG.
Yeah.
Like Assassin's Creed, for example, I've heard people say it's not an RPG. So,
Yeah, I mean, like, my whole understanding of RPG went so deep from Morrowind. I mean, like, I would just have that game on all the time. So, like, if I was busy doing something, I'd go to the beach, sit down, and then go and do something in real life, and then I would come back and carry on, stand up, and move on. So it was almost as if I was when I was going from point A to point B, I'd stop somewhere and camp almost. So I was pretending I was camping and stuff. I was properly immersed in that game.
That's see, I think that's great. I think
Yeah,
that's awesome, especially for a kid. That's great. Letting your imagination go wild. I
yeah.
mean, so how old is if it was 2003? So you would have been a teenager then by that point, wouldn't you? By the time you played Morrowind, you would have definitely been in your teenage years, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, no, I would have been beyond teenage years. But for me, I grew up slow. I grew up slower than everyone else. So for my 20s would have been my teenage years technically.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, like I just completely fell in love with it, and I printed out all these like documents about where to travel and the best routes and stuff. So I had these like massive piles of paper, just sort of I'd flick through them and see which ones were the best ways to get to a certain town, and the shortest route and stuff.
that's great. I think so. I think that's fucking awesome, mate. Excuse my language. I think that's great.
Yeah, it was yeah, just total immersion. And I don't think Bethesda will make a game like that again. I mean, we're both looking forward to Elder Scrolls 6, but it's just going to be riddled with fast travel, and we've spoken about fast travel before. Which is just like, I think it's the RPG aspect killer. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there's no way they're not going to have fast travel in Elder
yeah,
Scrolls 6. Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it is a conundrum because you have to please everyone.
The thing I did notice is that your introduction to the role playing genre, as you said, was Morrowind, and mine was Final Fantasy. And even though I do class both as RPGs, they are tonally very different. I suppose again another genre that's kind of Final Fantasy will be called a JRPG because it came from Japan, and Morrowind is going to be called more or less from the West, right? So, and they, even though they're both RPGs, they are considered like I know that the JRPGs. A lot of that is, it's not I wouldn't say it's died out, but it's certainly rare in the West nowadays. You get the occasional one, especially on PlayStation. There's still quite a few, but on Xbox, there's very few JRPGs, and they've almost become a little bit of a dirty word. And
I think it's I think it's very saturated. We do have some JRPG simps over here, and it's especially in
yeah,
America. I mean, I'm not really a fan of anime
yeah,
or
for
anything
sure.
like that. I mean, like there's some stuff that I adore, like Akira and Crying Freeman, but
But
that's really it.
that's kind of, I think that's what I was trying to get. The point is like Final Fantasy is a JRPG because of how how the mechanics work.
Mm.
The turn based, the random battles are staples of JRPG, but it's not anime. It's not really anime. I mean, you've got like Cloud in his spiky hair, and I suppose you've got
Mm.
Tifa, who's got obviously her chest size is bigger than probably it should be, and stuff like that. So there's small elements.
Yeah, it's
Um,
bordering. It's on the
it's
fence.
bordering. It's on
Yeah,
the fence, and they do go too far sometimes. I mean, I like my JRPGs because I generally like the mechanics of them, but I have my limits too. If it goes too far into the silly anime, I also lose interest. So I've got my limits as
yeah,
well. But I suppose what I'm saying is I don't. I like both, and I don't like the way I think that JRPGs kind of get stapled a little bit. It's their own fault a little bit because some of them have delved way too much into the anime tropes. But they're not all like I played a game called Tales of Arise, which you've probably never heard of, which was last year, and I
mm.
loved it. I loved it. It's a JRPG. I loved it. It didn't go too far into the anime, but it didn't do very well. So they probably won't make a
Yeah,
sequel to it. It's because the genre is a little bit. It's got, like I say, it's got a little bit of a dirty kind of name to it, but they're not all like it. And for me, it's a shame because on the Xbox, especially, there is very, very few of them.
there was
Um,
one that we both played. I think was it called The Last Kingdom or something?
do you remember Lost Odyssey? That was on
That's the
Xbox.
one. That's
That
the
that
one I was talking
thing
about.
is about that was very good. The writing in that was very good. I thought the writing was pretty good in that because um,
Mm.
they were dealing with. I think they were immortal characters, weren't they? So it's like they'd lived all these lives,
Yeah,
and they had these like little side stories. I thought that wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it was all right. It was all right. I don't think I ever got to the end, but I definitely played a good chunk of it. But the games that stick out for me during my journey, obviously I've mentioned Morrowind, but another one which sticks out, and it's not really an RPG, even though I treated it as one. It was more of a shooter, and that is BioShock. And it's obviously one of the things that is cut into our intro. You can probably guess which ones they are if you're a fan. For some reason, I just became encapsulated with BioShock and just enraptured, pun intended, with the whole universe of it. It was just a complete paradox. It was something that could never have worked, and that's why I loved the game. Just to sort of see the psychology behind it all, and I think beyond that.
What genre would you call that then, Pete? You're right. It's a first-person shooter, as in the viewpoint, and yes, the majority of the time you are shooting enemies. And I've played it, but I didn't finish it. I did play it, and I thought it was okay. But I was coming from it obviously much later, so it was not downgraded. But I came into it much later. What genre would you call it though?
It's dipping into a lot of different ones. I mean, like if you looked it up at a online store, it would probably say shoot 'em up or horror. But I wouldn't really classify it as a horror, even though it has certain elements of horror. I would say it's more like a sort of a thriller, and it is a shoot 'em up. It's an FPS, but for me, it was the story. It wasn't about the game mechanics at all. It was just I was so eager to find the next audio diary to find out what the hell is going on down here, and it was just the perfect setting, a really gripping storyline, and it just kept me going all the way to the end. I ended up playing the second one, which wasn't as good, but it gave you more insight into the world, which I loved. And then the third one came out, which was just complete bollocks.
You didn't like the third one?
No.
Is it because you had to what was her name? Was her name Elizabeth? You had to she escort her around?
No, it wasn't that. It was I think primarily it was the setting. First point, it was set up in the clouds, and I think that kind of it took away from the whole moody sort of sunken city of Rapture, and sort of gave it a sort of a bright atmosphere, which I didn't think really suited the story. And I predicted the ending of the story. I remember thinking to myself, the character we play better not be the fucking antagonist. He fucking better not be, because it was kind of steering towards that way.
It's hard to not have a no spoiler roll with such an old game. I haven't played it. I doubt I will. But even I know it did the whole multiverse thing, didn't it?
It did, and it turns out that the character you were playing was the enemy. So you were all, you were fighting yourself, and I was just like, this is just, I couldn't believe I predicted it. And yeah, so they brought DLC out, which sort of returned to Rapture. I didn't play it. I watched some gameplay of it, but I was just so pissed off with the third one. But yeah, no, the first two are just absolutely amazing. And if you're into a good storyline, viewers, and you haven't heard of BioShock or haven't seen it, then go and play it.
It's as I said, I didn't finish it. I probably should have, but the time I did spend with it, I thought it was very atmospheric. And I think maybe me personally, had I played it when it first came out, I think I would have got a lot more out of it. But even I felt it was atmospheric, and atmosphere in games can be very difficult.
Yeah,
especially dealing with, as you say, horror vibe. It was, seeing the big brothers kind of walking around with the little sisters. That was pretty intense. Some of that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very oppressive atmosphere. You felt like you were trapped in this world. You couldn't get out. and that sort of added to the whole mystery of really what happened. And so as you carry on, you find out more and more, and all these really rich characters with backstories. And it's really the only game that I think is worthy of being a film or like a TV series. And I understand that Netflix bought the rights to it a few years back. We've yet to see anything, but I'm hoping they haven't sort of forgotten about it, and I hope they are doing something. But we'll see. Yeah.
I think the whole video game movies, is its own podcast that we could go through around the ringer. And
Yeah.
after watching Monster Hunter not that long ago, and
oh
wow.
God, yeah, no, I've not seen that. Thank fuck.
You don't want it. Yeah.
Less is said about that, but as you said, it's its own podcast.
As for me, I was very much Final Fantasy. I was a Square Enix. They used to be called SquareSoft, and they became Square Enix. To the detriment, by the way, because the quality of their games, in my opinion, have gone down over the years. Final Fantasy VII, and then Final Fantasy VIII came out not that long after.
Yeah.
Obviously, to again on the original PlayStation, obviously to take advantage of the Final Fantasy VII blew all the sales records at the time. Final Fantasy VIII came out, not as good, still good, not as good. And Final Fantasy IX came out, still good, not as good. And then for me, there was a big gap between Final Fantasy VII and the next game that really caught my attention, so much so that I do debate myself if I like this Final Fantasy X is the game I'm on about more than 7.
Right. Is that the boy with the boy band, or have I got that wrong?
The 10 is the Tidus, and it's known for the infamous laughing scene that is a massive meme, which I'm sure you must have come across.
I probably have, yeah.
It's got the most awkward laughing scene that you'll ever imagine.
Okay.
But the game itself, I think because it was the first Final Fantasy which had voice acting and cutscenes,
right?
And it was a PlayStation 2, so it was a big jump in graphics because Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX were still very pixelated. They were both on the PlayStation 1. Final Fantasy X was the first one on the PlayStation 2. So you got first one that had cutscenes, first one that had voice acting.
Was it dedicated 3D as opposed to the sort of isometric views that we had in 7? No. 8 was 3D, wasn't it? What am I talking about?
It was the screens were kind of set in place. It reminded me a little bit of the old Resident Evil games, whereas the backgrounds were all kind of set in place, but you could run around in them. But technically, in Final Fantasy X, there was no open world. It actually was a very linear game, which normally I wouldn't be a fan of. But this one just gripped me. 8 and 9 didn't. 7 did and introduced me. 8 and 9 were disappointments to me. Number 10 is, again, it's a game that I've played 7 or 8 times through. I've bought all the remasters of it. It's been remastered like 4 times. On each generation, there's a remaster, and I buy it every time. Again, through the story, even though I can admit that some of the voice acting is cringe, but it was new at the time. You've got to remember, it was kind of the first attempt. It is cringe. But again, it was one of the few games at that point for me, because we're talking PlayStation 2, so you're talking probably pre-Xbox, just about. And it was a heavy story game. It dealt with, there's love in it. There's a girl love interest, not as good as Aerith. Eris, got me doing it. Yeah, and that's stuff. But there's stuff to do. I'm not going to bore him with my own private life, but there's father figure stuff. I myself didn't have a dad, so there was a whole story to do with a missing dad, which I related to, especially at that age.
Yeah.
So it grabbed me, and that was the second game that grabbed me in Final Fantasy X.
Right.
And I love that game, I do. And they even teased. I know that 7 obviously is being remade, and we'll talk about that at some point. But even number 10, they have teased because there was a sequel to it which wasn't very good. But they've teased the third game. They keep teasing. Every 5 or 10 years, they'll release some kind of teaser that they're going to make a third game in this series, and they never do. They never will. I don't know why they keep doing it. It's been 20, 25 years or whatever since it came out. And that was the second game that really grabbed me.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it sounds like to me that they were testing the audience, weren't they? Sort of like with releasing these teasers, seeing how much interest there was in it. I mean, like they knew full well that people were waiting for ages for a Final Fantasy VII remake, and
oh, of that took them. How long was that? 30 years, Pete?
oh
25
yeah,
years?
something like
When was
that.
it? When did it come out? 95, 96? I think.
Yeah, something like that. And they obviously gave in and realized that the fan base was absolutely huge, and I don't think that they've been able to capture the same magic since. Personally, I mean, I quite liked number 8, and I think we're delving into the Final Fantasy universe too much, but I did like number 8, and number 7, but other than that, I never really played much of the others. The whole boy band one, which was, what was that? Was that 15?
That was one of the more recent ones. That was 15, I think, is the one we're
Yeah,
talking about. When there's four blokes, and you're right, they're all sitting in a car. That's the one you're on about, isn't it?
yeah, that was just boring.
Yeah.
But moving on from that, my life has just been very much driven by games, and I think it's slightly different now. I don't really pay much attention to games. I'm more of a creator, and we can get into that another time. But there have, since then, I think another title is Witcher 3 Wild Hunt.
Yes. Agreed.
And yeah, that just literally just it broke me in terms of how utterly brilliant it was. The main story, the side quests, especially with the one with the Red King or something like that.
The Red Baron, wasn't
The
it?
Red Baron, that was it. That storyline was just, oh my God, it was heartbreaking. But
It was. Yeah.
yeah, it was so good. Yeah, the whole universe as well, just absolutely amazing. And I think for me, the reason why I play games is because of the story. For me, it's like a visual storybook. And originally, that's why I got into games. I mean, like, yeah, I played Sonic and total rubbish. But I think primarily that's the reason why I play games, is to get sucked into a world, experience a good storyline, and just feel like you're actually there. And I think I've been trying to recapture the magic of Morrowind and Witcher 3 ever since. So, I mean,
It's a difficult one because I agree with you that to lose yourself. See, we both like movies. I would say you like movies more than me. That doesn't mean I don't like them. I struggle nowadays to lose myself in movies as
yeah,
much as I used to. When I was a kid in the 80s, I was all over it. As I've gotten older, for whatever reason, it's become much more difficult for me to lose myself in films.
yeah,
So games have become much more. I now put games before films because I need to feel that I'm in the world. I struggle to lose myself in. Doesn't mean I can't, but I struggle. It's a much harder sell. So games have taken over that for me.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
yeah.
go on.
It's the interactivity of games, isn't it? I think is what it is.
I think it's like it's the living vicariously. Like, of course, you can do it through films, but you know, in RPGs, you get to. It sounds all cliche, but in RPGs, more often than not, you're the hero. Not in every game, but more often than not, you're the hero. You got to save the world. You got to save the girl.
Yeah,
You're someone of importance. You're someone who generally a lot. It's all cliche. Generally you start as it's the pauper to the prince story. More often than not, that's how they go. You start off as kind of a nobody, and then you become important and you become powerful and all these things. And more often than not, you do the right thing. As I said, not every game, but most games, it's you do the right thing and you become the hero and stuff like that. And in films, you can do it. You can live vicariously through the characters. I'm not saying you can't,
mm,
but it'll never be. it's still a harder sell than you putting yourself there, which games let you do. They let you do, in my opinion. So
Hmm. Yeah,
it's become my favorite form of escapism, I suppose.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, totally. I mean,
and
I'm not as much of a movies fan as I used to be, just because the they just don't really know how to make good movies anymore.
yeah,
And
that hasn't helped as well. Yeah, how they make
yeah,
movies nowadays.
and you have your favorite directors and stuff, and sometimes they'll come out with something good, but I think that there's a shelf life with film directors, and they sort of tend to sort of lose their grip on how to make a decent film. Like Ridley Scott is a good
Oh
example.
God, yes.
um, but in terms of games, yeah, it is a form. It's a great form of escapism, and I do get annoyed when people who don't play games take the piss out of gamers. They say, "Oh, all you do is stay at home and play games and stuff," and it's just like, well, mental health, perhaps. Have you ever considered that? But yeah, I mean, like, we've we've both been playing games for, I mean, like, at least 30 years. I think you're probably sort of like
I'm a
35 years.
Yeah, I'm a couple of years ahead probably, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a long time nonetheless. Um, and as you mentioned mental health. Like I say, we won't get into it too much, but
Mm.
it has helped for
Yeah.
both of us. It's helped our mental health. It has helped. It's we've both gone through certain stuff, as everybody does, and sometimes you do need to get away. And more often than not, it's I think gaming gets a lot of. I think when people think of gaming, is because so much of it is all online now. People think of every time, like everyone, anytime anyone asks me, "What are you into? What are your hobbies?" and I say gaming, I then feel I have to add something afterwards.
Mm.
I've got to add and let them know is I'm not talking about me playing Call of Duty online,
Well,
and
that's the first thing they
I'm
think of, isn't it?
yeah, I'm not that. I'm not that gamer.
Mm.
I'm not somebody who goes online and does all this. I'm not that. I'm somebody who, it's a, it's not a social thing for me. That doesn't mean I can't ever play co-op. Me and you have played co-op on Monster Hunter, but again, I'm sure we'll get to that at some point too. So it's not that I can't play co-op and that I hate it. I don't hate it, but it is mainly, for me, it is an individual thing. It's somewhere for me to lose myself in, not somewhere to really be social. Now, does that make me antisocial? Maybe. That's fine.
Yeah, but who cares?
I
This is
don't
the
care.
point
No,
that,
that's what I mean. I'm not bothered.
yeah. And another thing, though, about the importance of gaming is that gaming has saved my life.
Yeah,
Not in terms of just mentally, like mental health wise, but it's physically saved my life. So before I really got into gaming, I was so shit at reflexes.
yeah.
I was very bad, and I was working at B&Q, and one day I was trying to put a really heavy object up on one of those really tall shelves, like really high up, and you have these portable stairs. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to wheel it in front and then sort of put the locks on the wheels and then walk up the stairs with the object to put on the shelf, right? But I I had forgotten to put the lock on the wheels, and I had this really heavy cistern, toilet cistern, and I was trying to heave it onto this shelf, and the whole staircase thing started to move, and I had to use my reflexes to grab onto the staircase in time. And yeah, I just destroyed a cistern in the process, but
You survived.
I completely, yeah,
It's
I saved myself from serious injury, and that was because of computer games. The fact that I had developed like these decent reflexes. So that's just like a tiny example of
video game saved your life, Pete. There you
yeah,
go. That's what you can go with.
and they can educate you as well as if you play. I mean, this is a shit example, but like Assassin's Creed games where they put you in different periods of time and stuff like that, and it gives you a good example.
That's the best part of those games, Pete. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy doing the assassin stuff. Of course I do, but getting to explore, Paris in different times, getting to explore the new games because come out. That's in Baghdad.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. So going through all these different kind of time periods. I think it's pretty good. No problem there.
Yeah, it's awesome. But it's a very important facet of our society now for the entertainment industry. It generates billions every year in revenue or whatever you want to call it, and it's such a massive thing. And back when we first started, it was like on the fringe. You were in a minority, and look at it now.
Video games back when we started was a niche.
Totally.
It was a niche idea, and also had a lot of bad connotations to it. It was for antisocial people. That's what it was for. It was for antisocial people, weirdos, freaks. And nowadays, it's cool.
Yeah. But
it's cool.
Here's an argument, or a question, I should say, is because there's been a lot of talk about this with certain titles inciting violence in people. I mean, we can label Grand Theft Auto is arguably one of them. Do you believe that a violent video game will cause someone to be violent? I mean, we can talk about ourselves. It doesn't for me. I don't know about you.
I think no, I know. But what I think is there is some people, not me or you, and it's not many, who are. Yes, be careful what you say. Who are who are very impressionable.
Yeah.
And that goes for any form of entertainment. So I remember growing up, there was all that big palaver over the Chucky films. Do you remember that?
Yeah, Child's Play 3 or the second one, and the two boys who went out and killed Jamie Bulger.
Now I saw Child's Play 3. Didn't make me do it. So you saw Child's Play and didn't make you do it. So 99.9% of people who watch Child's Play 3 didn't make them go and do it. So it's the same kind of thing with anything like that. There's going to be the small percentage of people who are incredibly impressionable. I'm not going to say they're stupid, because that's probably the wrong word to use.
No.
But there's probably something mentally wrong there that they struggle to see the difference between technically fiction and reality. So that's already kind of there in them, I believe.
Yeah. If we tie in something else to this, which I mean, I watched a documentary recently on bringing up people the right way. So, like, bringing up children in the right way. And they ran an experiment. They found two kids who both had the violent gene, and they one family brought them up in a really nice way. Another family didn't, basically. And it turns out that, lo and behold, the family who didn't bring up the child the right way, the child became very prone to anger and was quite violent and stuff. Whereas the other guy wasn't. He was brought up in the right way, and he ended up becoming a police officer. I don't know whether that means anything.
No, I've seen the same programs you have, at least regarding like the video game stuff, right? And it's so silly to me that they think it's the video games. It's the person.
Yeah.
It's the person. As simple as that. It's the person. So I mean, unless they're going to wrap this person in cotton wool for their entire life and never expose them to any kind of fiction whatsoever. I'm not saying it was always going to happen, but it's probably always going to be a high risk.
Well, I was going to say, there is a risk no matter what you do.
Well, yeah.
It's that there are going to be people who haven't brought up their children very well, and maybe they don't know how to, and there needs to be some education there. But neither of us have kids, so it's not like we can talk much. But
True.
It seems to me that those without much of a sort of a knowledge about this thing and no morality as such, or less morality, they'll be more prone to do it. But as you said, it is literally like 0.1% or 1% of the public. GTA has been involved in certain sort of lawsuits and stuff that Rockstar have to deal with a multiple amount every year. But
But the reason why GTA is picked on so much because it's one of the few games, and it is few because generally the majority of the games put you in the role as the protagonist.
hmm,
And GTA is one of the few games where it's kind of like, okay, so there's this game world. Everyone's a bastard. There is no in their world, pretty much, they're all bad guys.
yeah,
But most games, there is a clear good guy. But in that game, in that world they've created, it's just like no, everyone's a villain. So that's why they've been so open to so much criticism because their idea of protagonist, like what was his name, Trevor? You probably heard about this. There's a torture scene in GTA 5,
oh,
and there was so much palaver made over that.
yeah, you have to
And
torture someone. Yeah, I remember.
yeah, and he technically is one of the protagonists. Now, I've played GTA, as I'm sure you have.
Hmm.
He's far from a protagonist, and out of the three protagonists you play in that game, he's easily the most evil of the three. He's easily the most crazy of the three. And
Yeah, no, he's
the other two are actually not that bad people. Yeah, they're criminals, but they're not evil. Whereas he is a psychopath.
it's varying degrees of it in it. I think Michael
Yeah,
is probably the least, and then you have I've forgotten the other guy's name,
Franklin, isn't it?
something like that. Yeah, who's sort of like kind of on the fence, and then yeah, you have Trevor, who is just literally like this redneck, doesn't give a shit. You know, will just sort of like barge his way into anything and fuck the consequences. Yeah,
And you got Mike, and you got Michael and Franklin who aren't evil, but they're still bad guys. They're still bad protagonists,
mm.
even if, as you say, they are different degrees of evil. Like they're not the biggest. They're not the biggest evil in the game, but they are still. They're still fine with killing people and robbing people and doing all these things that you're not meant to do.
Yeah,
They're all fine with it. Their moral compass is all backwards from what it's meant to be. So that's why GTA gets the flack it does because there really is
yeah,
there's
and
no good guys.
I think it's important to have games like this because you know if you feel frustrated with real life, then it's nice to have a game that you can just take out all your frustrations on. You know,
Yep.
in a vast variety of ways.
Yeah. And the thing is GTA. I always thought it's actually a therapy game. A lot of it is a therapy game. If you've had a bad day at work and you hate your boss,
Yeah,
what's the best action for you? To do something in real life about it and get yourself into trouble, or to go around on a murder spree in a silly video game where you turn it off and nobody and that's it and the anger's gone
oh, bro,
and then
the amount of
so,
times that I've found I've selected a rooftop, perhaps a sheltered rooftop, and sort of literally pulled out an AK-47 or a rocket launcher and just started blamming at the people below and seeing how long I could survive. You know, me and my brother would have this game where we'd start at one point of the map, give ourselves like 5-6 stars, and then see if we can get to the other
see if you
side.
can get to the other side. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think most people have done that. I think most people have. I remember what I used to do is I used to play the game and generally normally, and then I'd get to a safe spot and I say, okay, so I've played the game for the day. Now I'm just going to go crazy for 10 minutes. And
yeah,
what happens happens. I've got my save game, so that's fine. I've
yeah,
already saved.
yeah. I think that's
So
how
then,
everyone does it.
yeah, and then that's it. So I'd go to the ammunition. I'd go buy every weapon I could find, stock up on the ammo, and then just go crazy and see what happens. And that would be it. And the frustration the frustration of your day would generally subside.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, like all of this,
it's a good thing. It's a good thing. That part is a
it
good thing. But
is.
you'll never convince the media of that. They you can't convince them of that.
No,
I don't think so.
but yeah, I mean, like the issue is that I kind of agree with them, but only in a sort of a fraction of a way. You know, it's like I do understand, but it all comes back to the same thing. All these arguments that I have with my other mate about sort of how to, you know, restore society and our morals and stuff, all just comes down to the same thing, which is proper parenting. If you're not going to bring up a child well, then don't expect much. It's in the national curriculum of schools. You've got to do that right. I mean, the way it is at the moment is shit. But anyway, we're talking about games. We understand and we know that games can give us comfort. Games can sort of change things about us. For me, it was my reflexes and the ability to escape into a world when you can't really handle this one. It's a good thing, and this is why single player games will always be king, because people like that sort of experience, that decision of, right, I want to go do this now. And multiplayer games are fun, like Monster
They have
Hunter World.
they have their moments. I personally prefer the cooperative games, but I know that I'm probably in the minority. I know that a lot of gamers they do like the whole death matches. Of course they do. Otherwise, look at the success of Call of Duty.
Mm,
So you got to understand that we're probably I speak for myself anyway, probably in the minority, is that I don't enjoy that aspect of it. I don't enjoy that competitiveness.
yeah,
I don't like it in reality, so why would I like it in my games?
yeah.
Um,
I don't like the whole competitive aspect of gaming, like as you said, death matches and PvP. I can't stand.
yep.
Like games like Street Fighter and Tekken and Mortal Kombat. I don't like them. I'll quite happily watch people play them, but yeah, competition is never been my strong suit. Never liked it.
No. But it can be fun. We play Monster Hunter, which is a co-op game, and we've put 200-300 hours into it. Let's be honest. That's its own podcast again. But there's
Yeah,
the cooperative aspect, and I enjoy that stuff. I do quite enjoy playing games where you have to work as a team and we've all got our different roles.
yeah.
I'm a bit obsessed about it, as you know. It's like if me and you play a game and we're both the same class, I can't have it.
No, you can't
I
handle
can't.
that. Yeah,
I can't handle it. One of us has got to be a different class, so we bring something else to the team. Because for me, that's the biggest thing. If we're both doing the same job, then that's not fun for me. So I'll go be the healer character. Not that you really can in Monster Hunter, but so that is what I get out of the co-op stuff. It's bringing different aspects to it and trying to get stuff to work, trying to solve the puzzle, I suppose,
yeah.
with different skill sets that we have.
I
That's what I get out of it.
I think it's hilarious when we go and try and kill a monster, and we have to fill 2 slots of our team to make it 4, and you're sitting there praying that they don't have the same weapon that you do. And it happened. When it happens, you're just like, oh, for fuck's sake. You really hate it. I just find
I
it
know,
hilarious.
and I know that it's a problem, and like I fully own up to it that I have issues with that.
Oh, it's
And
funny.
I always apologise in advance because I know that it's an issue for me way more than it should be.
Well, you stay silent for the whole match and stuff. I think it's funny. It's just hilarious. Or you'll duck out. You just, fuck it. Let's just
Sometimes I'm just like I can't handle it, or he'll do something that I don't approve of because I'm the same class, right? So of course I know it all. Of course I don't know it all, but of course in my mind I know it all, and I'm playing the best, and I know I'm the best bow player, right? Not you.
Yeah.
And he'll do something I don't agree with, right? And I'll be like, this guy's fucking shit.
And you'll just
It's probably not,
Yeah.
but it's just like I can't help it.
It's
It's an issue.
kick him out.
I'm working on it, Pete. I'm in therapy for it, mate.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. I think it's a good aspect of your character. But yeah, I mean, that's really our experience with games. That's where we've come from, and we do believe that we know more than a fair amount of people out there. There are so many young gamers out there who are spoiled today by the level of interactivity they have with games, and it would be nice if they paused for a moment and started looking up at the history of where games started and sort of appreciate the early days as that we've come through. And
Just remember when you're sitting behind a load screen, for example, on Starfield, which there's 100 load screens. Just remember that if you were playing that on a ZX Spectrum, it would take 2 hours for each load screen.
Oh, mate.
Loading up that cassette. So just think about that.
Yeah, let's literally go and have your dinner and then take the dog for a walk, and then it might have been loaded up by then. Yeah, it was.
If you're playing it would take 10 years to finish that game.
Yeah. Oh, easily. Yeah, definitely, easily. Uh, all right, everyone, that's going to wrap that episode up for today. That was a really interesting chat. Hopefully, you guys have a better understanding about what we're talking about, because we do know what we're talking about. And when we come to talk about other things like Monster Hunter and Final Fantasy, and particularly the lies of the gaming industry, I think is probably what we're going to be talking about next.
Yeah.
Is more greatly founded because we know what we're talking about. And with that, we're going to say goodbye.
Thanks for tuning in again, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Indeed. Okay, everyone, take care. Goodbye.
See ya.